Good morning, I'm Ann Preston, and I'm going to give you a little bit of background on watercolor and a little bit of knowledge. I hope it's really for beginners, but we'll see if it gives some hints to those that have been painting for some time. Anyway, I am a member of North End Gallery and a proud member of the art community here in Leonardtown. Okay, we're going to do a little work in watercolor, and I want to give you a little bit of background about myself. I started off with an art major, taught high school art for 1 year, and then I got married and we began to move to lots of states in 4 different countries. And so I ended up teaching a variety of subjects in almost all grade levels. But in all of those subjects, I tried to incorporate art because I felt like hands-on, the students would retain and remember and the subject that we were discussing. So anyway, I didn't start watercolor until I retired about 14 years ago. And I took a few classes, I read a few books, but mostly I just painted and painted and painted until I came up with what I consider my style, which is clean edges, lots of color, and I love shapes. So I do a lot of flowers, I do a lot of fruits and vegetables, I do a lot of buoys. I don't have any examples right now, but I do a lot of buoys. Here are some. I do boats, I do some structures. I like lighthouses, can you tell? And more buoys, and I do a few other things, scenery, and more boats, and I also like shells. So these are cards that I have available, but they're about all I can show you right now. So we're going to cover 4 things today. We're going to cover paper, paint, brushes, and some techniques for texturing. So we're going to start with paper, and we're going to talk about texture first. This is hot press, where it is rolled between very hot presses, and so it's really quite smooth. I don't use it very much. People that do very delicate work will use it, and my daughter, who illustrates children's books, uses it. I use cold press, which is also run through presses, but it is a little rougher. They call it tooth. It has a little more tooth to it. There's also one that is called very, very rough, but I don't use that either. Then there's also one that is a plastic paper called Yupo, and it is kind of fun. I haven't used it a lot, but you can see you can take it actually right down to the white. I'm gonna clean this up. You can see that you can take it right down almost to the white. And the other fun thing about it is you can look what it's gonna do. It kind of walks on the paper. And I'm gonna put a little blue in here. Okay, now here we go. Here comes the fun part with Yupo. I'm going to draw a little line and watch it run, so you can do all sorts of fun things with it. It's wonderful to do water because of the texture that it gives, and so that is Yupo. I don't use it very much, but I have. The next thing to talk about is weight, the weight of the paper. There's usually 90, 140, and 300 weight. And by weight, that means how thick it is. 140 I don't use very often because it warps and it has to be stretched before you usually use it. I prefer the 300 pound. It's heavier, and you don't have to start by stretching it. I don't know if you can see this, but you can see how much thicker one is than the other. And that is due to the count. So this is 140 and this is 300. Okay, the other thing to consider in paper is the grade. Now, I use artist grade, but there is also, I will occasionally use this from Michael's, but I use it only if I'm gonna do a very small painting or if I'm gonna do a painting with some ink in it, because it's a little bit smoother. But right here you can see it says 140, and here it says, where does cold press? So you know what you're getting there. Okay, so that's that. And now I want to talk about how you can maybe buy paper. You can buy it in blocks like this, and you just simply separate it up here and you can use the blocks. I prefer to use the sheets. I buy big sheets of it, and the sheets are usually about 30 by 22. And then you break them into and that's why I like to use the big sheets, because I can break it into whatever size. And you do break it. You bend it and then you break it into the size that you want. Okay, so the blocks are a little bit hard to get apart. So what you do is, because they are all glued, so you open it up on the inside, you will see a little spot right here where you can use a knife or a palette knife, and you very carefully begin to open it up, and eventually you'll be able to pop it open. Now the thing is about block, because you should wet your paper because it has a sizing on it. So usually it's better to use a wash of water before you get started. Now we're going to talk about brushes, and there are various shapes and there are various qualities and there are various materials that brushes are made out of and quality. So first of all, I'll show you various brushes. This is a round. Let's see if the round will stay put. This is a flat. Let's see if I can find a flat. How about if I just move over? This is a wash. You can see some of my brushes have had a big workout. And this is a fan brush. This is an oval or filbert. It'll show up a little bit more if I wet it. Let's see. That looks like, it's called a filbert, but I call it an oval. And this is a specialty one. This is a rigger, and it can make very narrow lines. This is a flat brush. This is a scrubber, and you can use it to really get in there and scrub down to the white or close to it. And this is one of my favorites. I don't know what it's called, but I use it to do grass and all sorts of things. It's just my little thing. And then of course there are sizes. So you can go all the way from like a 14, they go all the way up to 20, or you can go to a 0. You can see, I don't use this either one very much, but they do come in various sizes. And then there's also quality. You know, I don't spend very much money on my brushes. I usually buy inexpensive brushes. This is one that I've been buying at Michael's. And a lot of people will only buy very expensive brushes, but I would rather spend my money on quality paper, heavy paper, than on the brushes. And maybe I'm missing out, I don't know. But so far, so good. It's been working for me. Okay, and then there is also what the brushes are made out of. They can be made from mink and sable and squirrel and synthetics, and a combination of all of those, and imitations of all of those. The ones that I use the most are the rounds. As you can, I don't know if you can see this. This is where I keep my paints. And I almost always use just rounds. I don't know why, but that's just what my preference is, because I can do what I generally do with those. I will use a flat brush occasionally. And as I said, I use this and I use the rigger. I don't use the fan very much. I use the scrubber a lot to get down to the white. And the wash, I will use the wash. I forgot to even mention. It is used to like if you want a sky and you want to wash the color down through the whole thing. And I don't use this one very much, occasionally. So that's brushes. Now we're going to talk about the different kinds of paints, the different materials. There are a lot out there that's available. I usually use tube paint. They don't always come this big, but then you usually put them into a palette. And my palette is kind of a big mess, but it's colors I know and trust. And I can make them as gushy, wet, that means as wet, or dry as I want. And I can put things in the middle. Anyway, so we'll start with tube paint. So here's an example of tube paint. Okay, I'm gonna put that down. Let's see if I can work upside down. I would like to paint this a little bit brighter. And then we'll work down. It's essential you're able to make the colors like as you want it. Okay, now we're gonna do pan. I don't use pan paint very much. I got this wonderful set. It's from France. It's beautiful and it does work very well. The colors are delightful. I'm going to maybe use this green. I use this little one for traveling now. Okay, there's the intense color. Now we're going to lock it down. There are markers, believe it or not, there are watercolor markers. I don't use them very much, but maybe I should start. It would be wonderful to start using something with a narrow, so that you can actually get something narrow. And then they have some that are, the other end is usually more like a brush. But the crucial part, contrary to a regular marker, is that you can draw the color down and make it light. Okay, now there's liquid watercolor, and this is an example of liquid watercolor. And it's great fun. It's very intensive color, very intensive. Lots of pigment in it. I'm just going to put a little drop here. And then we'll draw this one down. Oops. So you can see that, but okay, I better put this lid on because these are dangerous. Okay, then there are watercolor brushes, watercolor pencils. Regular colored pencils you can't use, but this is watercolor pencils, and actually you can, again, the important part is that you are able to draw down the color and have some in between, some light. Okay, and then there's one here that is really fun, and it's more like watercolor crystals, and I think you would use it maybe, I don't know. I've experimented a little bit with it. I haven't used it very much, but I think I need to use it a little bit more. And it's called Brusho, and it's just crystals of color. So let's pick out a more fun color than brown. See what happens? Isn't that fun? Okay. Also, there are sticks, watercolor sticks. They look a little bit like pastels, and they're also watercolor pens. I think that I need to start trying some of those for fine lines. I think it would be really fun. There is also iridescent pan paints, and they are fun. Let me go over here where the pan paints are. So, okay. And you can lighten it up. It doesn't really probably show that it's iridescent, but it is. And there's, you can get various colors and shades, and there's silver to gold, deeper gold. They're fun to use. Okay, now we're going to talk about texturing or techniques. Before we get too far, we're going to do the resist or mask. This is what I use for bigger areas. This is what I use for smaller, narrower ones. So I'm going to use this one first. And so it makes a nice thin line. It's kind of like a miracle. And so this will, when we take this up after the paint's been on it, it will leave a white line. This, you have to be very careful so that you don't ruin your brush. I'll use this one. Usually wet your brush, then you can paint resist on or mask on larger areas. So we'll let that dry. Now, normally I would go in and wash this brush right away, or you're going to ruin your brush. But right now I'm just going to put it in some very thick soap and just let it sit, and I think it'll be fine. So, okay, resist is used to leave big white areas, and I don't truthfully use it that much because it leaves such sharp edges. I'd rather paint around something, but I do use it occasionally, especially this narrow one. Okay, we'll have to let that dry, and we're going to paint over it, and then you're going to actually see how it can leave a white. Okay, and this one we're going to use is alcohol. It is so much fun. You can either put it on just the white paper, or you can do it over another color. So we're going to do this one, and we're going to put maybe a blue over the top. Okay, and then we're going to drop some just regular old rubbing alcohol on it. And you're gonna, it's so much fun, and it makes things look cold. So this one actually shows a little of the yellow underneath. This one just the white of the paper. Isn't that fun? So next week we'll do buoys, or the next time we get together, the next class we'll do buoys, and we can definitely use some of this with the buoys. Okay, the next one is salt. I'm not really super successful with salt, but it is used often to make things look like snowflakes. So I'll try it. As I said, I'm not super successful, but it has to have just the right amount of pigment and just the right amount of, you have to wait until just the right amount of dry. So hopefully this will work. But I didn't wait too long. We'll see. Now the paint has to dry, and we'll see what it looks like. Okay, the next one we'll do is scraping. And people use this so you paint whatever you want, let it really dry. And then they use it often for small branches, like if they're doing a woods scene and they want to have just a rustic shape. Can you see that? And the next one we're going to do is splatter. This is kind of a dangerous one, but you can either do it over paint that's already dry, or you can do it paint that is wet. So we're going to do a little of each. And you can see the difference in how it works. Okay, now I'm going to cover up the areas I don't want to get wet. As you can see, it's going to splatter all over. Okay, so now you take a toothbrush, wet it a little, get the color that you want. And this is often used, like if you have a snow scene, you can put little speckles of paint on this to look like snowflakes, or you can, people use it to show when they do sand. Oops, I need a little more paint. And you can use various colors. So you can see this one is spreading out. Let's use a different color now. How about, what color should we use? How about a different blue? So you could do several colors. Okay, that's splatter, and that can be really fun. So this is putting it on the dry, and this putting it on the wet. It spreads out a little bit more. Another method that I use a lot is pressing, and it's one of my most favorite. Okay, I'm going to use some of this paint. And what you do is you press into it, and it makes it even darker where you pressed. Can you see that? Wow, my favorite tool. Oh, by the way, we need to look back here at the salt. It actually worked. And we also need to paint this, the resist or the nest. So again, I press into this, I do this a lot. You'll see how it makes it darker. The next one I'm going to talk about is blot. And I use this, people use this a lot with making clouds. So we'll show you what that does. It's kind of fun. And you can, of course, use it in other ways also. So let's say you're making a landscape and you want to do some clouds. Okay, so then you take a paper towel or a tissue and you just press into it. And you can see how it looks like a cloud. Isn't that fun? Now, another one is Drybrush. I'm not super successful with Drybrush, but I'll show you an example. You start with a very dry brush, and this one, unfortunately, is not dry. So we'll see if we can do it. And you put your paint on it, and then you draw it. You have to be very horizontal, and you draw it. Oops. And you draw it across, and you can see it gives another kind of texture, kind of a rough, barky texture. Or it wouldn't work unless you had the rougher paper. If you had hot press, it probably wouldn't show anything. Now, another fun one is sponging. So we'll get our sponge a little wet, just a little wet, and then we'll dip it into paint and we'll sponge. It's better if you use a natural brush. A sponge. I don't know if a regular sponge would work. Okay, that's sponging. Now, wet spot, it is very good for showing reflection, a little spot like on a piece of fruit or on a boat or something that you want a little spot of reflection. Let's say you're doing an apple. And then just let it bleed into that area just a little. I left too much water in there. And it gives kind of a natural reflective area. I don't know what it's called. I call it wet spot. Okay, and then wet into wet. Here we go. We'll do two colors here, and you can see how they will blend in together. Here's a red, and then we'll do maybe a yellow. And so they can go in there. A lot of people use this a lot. I don't use it as much as many people because the way I paint is a little more controlled. Okay, I forgot to show you lifting. Okay, I use lifting a tremendous amount. I use it for shading and to pick up colors so that it's a little bit lighter. And this also proves that you don't have to really worry. You can almost always pick up some of your paint. Okay. And look, sometimes you have to do it a couple of times to get it down to what you want. But you can lighten things up quite a bit. If I were to leave my water on there a little bit longer, it would probably look a little bit better. Okay, and now I'm going to do it where you pick up the paint as you're working. And I use this a tremendous amount with. I use this more when I made a mistake and I need to pick up my paint. But I do use this one a lot. Okay, so I'm going to pick it up like for instance, if I want an area a little bit lighter, this is darker and I want this to be the shade light area. Okay, now you've seen brush show before, but it's so much fun. I thought I'd do it again. We'll do lemon this time. So, you know, it could be, if you were doing something like, we will be painting buoys, so you could put some of that on a buoy and just add a little bit of a texture. Pressing I've already done, so I don't know why I put that down there, but anyway. So there you go. Those are the main techniques. I use the alcohol a lot. I use the resist occasionally. I use the wet spot often. And I use the pressing all the time. And this one all the time where I lift up the paint. This one is probably my favorite. But when we do the buoys, we'll probably also try a lot of these other ones. So if you have a sponge around, we'll be using that. This is still, the paint is not wet, it's not dry yet, so we can't lift the resist up. We will as soon as it dries, and I'll promise I'll bring it back and let you see it. So the next class, we are going to paint buoys. And this is a painting that I finished. You know, everything looks better with a mat on it. So you should always have a mat around just to make you feel a little bit better. Okay, and of course then you can change where you have the mat. So we'll do that. I did this one and this one I've also done. Basically they're the same shapes, just totally different colors. And of course this one's not finished. But we will be doing buoys next week, next class. And if you are not very good at drawing, I will have available for you some simple drawings. And then, of course, you can change them out any way you want. You can make it your own by changing what colors you use and where you put your designs. And we will do texturing, we'll do some salt, we'll do some alcohol, we'll do some pressing. And for instance, here's, if you can see up close, the rope is all by being pressed in. That's all. And we will, here's some salt and here's some alcohol. We'll use various techniques that we talked about today. So anyway, we're going to be doing the buoys, and if you want, you can use this design or create your own, and you can decide on your own colors and your own designs. You can do whatever you want, and then we'll talk about colors. So you will need your paint. Of course, you'll need some paper and some brushes, and if you want to do your own design, draw it out, have it ready, your paint. And if you want to just use limited colors, if you go, like if you've never done it and you don't have paints and you want to go to Michael's and get paint, then get just 3 simple colors, and I'll show you we can really mix those colors into anything you want. We'll use a red and a blue and a yellow. So we're going to do that right now, and I'll show you. No, that isn't for real right now. So I'm using an alizarin crimson, and I will use ultramarine blue. My water is getting a little dirty here, so we hope that the yellow and an Aurelia, at least that's what I call it. Okay, so let's do a little experimenting. So here's the yellow, and we put a little red with it. So if you want to have an orange, you can definitely have your orange. And if you want a purple, you might be able to. Purple is really, really hard to create. You almost always have to buy a tube or a pan of it. But we're going to give it a try. It's sort of a purple, not a great purple. Okay, now let's see if we can make a green. Look at that, isn't that a beautiful green? So we kind of have a rainbow there, don't we? And if you want, you can make a brown or gray with all 3 colors. You probably know this. Oh, I had a nice brown. My color's a little weak here. I don't have enough pigment. But there's also a brown if you want it, which we might use for ropes or whatever. So really it's important to have quality paint. Artist paint has more pigment in it than student grade. So make sure that you get artist paint, even if you have to buy fewer tubes. Well, now that the paint is dry, we're going to take the resist off, and you can either use this, which is specifically made to take the resist off, or you can even use just a regular eraser. I'm using inexpensive paper, so sometimes the whole thing comes off, but we'll see. Hopefully it'll work here. Looks like it kind of got underneath a little bit, but you can see the fine line that you can create. And my resist is really old, and I should have used my newer resist to completely block it out. It should be completely white in there, but you can see that this is. I would use this, for example, if I wanted something totally white in here and I didn't want to chance getting paint on it, I would put some down there or down here. Or if I wanted a really fine white line, I could put it there. But you have to do it before you start. Be sure you do it before you start your painting. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned a little bit. And thank you for joining us. And I look forward to hopefully having you with the next class when we paint some buoys. And I think that it would be great fun. We can do your own designs, your own colors, and we'll look forward to seeing you then.